I'm here with David Roberts at the Goedhuis tasting in London to taste the On Promote 2014. David, could you explain a little bit about what's happened to the market for Burgundy in the last 15 years?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that it's been an absolute revolution for the wines of Burgundy. I think that historically, there was always extraordinary demand for white Burgundies, but there was a little bit of sort of caution about red Burgundy because there's sort of a lack of understanding and the variety of sort of styles that you could come across. You could say, I love Geoffroy Chambertin, and you buy one from one grower, and then the next time you go to a restaurant it's a completely different grower who might not have the same quality ideals or whatever, and then you'll suddenly be very disappointed. And there was a lot of sort of distrust or disillusionment or anything. And what's really happened in the last 15 years has been the whole quality of winemaking. You had a new generation coming through. I think that the previous generation were amazing vignerons, so the vineyards are in incredible conditions. And then the newer generation had the benefits of training, education at universities and sort of wine schools, and suddenly this whole quality level has gone to a new level, and new consumers are wanting to try different fruit styles, characteristics, and they want a breadth of a cellar. They don't want to have just Bordeaux or just New World wines or whatever. Burgundy has really been at sort of the forefront of it.
Has it shifted? Have people shifted from Bordeaux to Burgundy, or has the market simply expanded so that your customers are having both Bordeaux and Burgundy in their cellar?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely many clients who 15 years ago would have only bought Bordeaux, and many of the institutions in England, in London, their cellars would have been absolutely Bordeaux, Bordeaux, Bordeaux. And in the last 10 years, they're broadening out and they're wanting to have Burgundy, and they're buying Burgundy to lay down for future drinking. And I think that food styles have changed a lot as well, so that many of the sort of the new styles of cuisine actually suit Pinot Noir. They suit the sweetness of flavours of Pinot Noir, and some of those sort of firmer, harsher tannins that you get in Cabernet Sauvignon are less suitable to new styles of cuisine, and Pinot and Burgundy really suit that. So many things have sort of influenced the change.
And is that also a reason that Asia has become more interested in Burgundy?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I've always said that I think that Pinot Burgundy really suits Asian cuisine. It has that sweetness, but it also has that lovely sort of freshness and acidity, and I think that it works very, very well. Although, it's interesting because I remember saying that to a Chinese buyer, and then they said, well, look, you must remember also though that we like tannins. We've had X thousand years of drinking tea, and that's high in tannins, so that's why we like Bordeaux. So don't forget that, Bordeaux is a reason. But I do think that Pinot goes brilliantly with many styles of Asian cuisine. Yeah.
The Japanese market has actually been interested in Burgundy for probably 20 years now. Yeah. But there are newer markets. I mean, Hong Kong is just an extension, if you like, of here in St James's. But there's China in general. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that market hugely well, but I was in Hong Kong at the end of last year with sort of Hong Kong Chinese clients. And what really amazed me is their passion, enthusiasm, and their depth of knowledge. I mean, they are incredible. They know so much about it, and they love drinking it. I think that sometimes, in Europe we can be sort of nations of hoarders, and we put off drinking these wines, and it could be to the detriment. What I found was so lovely there was that the new Chinese consumers, they know an awful lot about it, and they're loving drinking it, and they're really enjoying it. So I think it's very exciting, and they like drinking it young, but they're not afraid to age it. And certainly, I think drinking aged white Burgundy, there's much more older white Burgundy being drunk in sort of the Hong Kong sort of Chinese markets than there is over here now, and they like that style, which is fantastic.
What about pricing? Obviously, with some very short harvests over the last 4 vintages, prices have naturally increased. How sustainable is this? and what reaction have you had from the market?
Yeah, I think that, our feeling is that, prices have gone up, and, we can't lose sight of the fact that, some appellations such as Volnay, Savigny-les-Bains, and Pommard, have lost sort of 80-85% of their crops in certain sort of vineyards and things. And, if you talk to, say, Jean-Pierre Charlot of Domaine Boyer, he says we've lost one complete crop in 3 years. So for them to carry on economically, they have to increase their prices. But the lovely thing, I think, that most domains, they try to increase steadily. And I think that it's very easy to pull out Vosne-Romanée, which obviously has increased in price dramatically. It is the most sought after village in the whole of Burgundy, and their prices are becoming very, very expensive. But if you exclude those really sought after villages, or in general, increases have been 4%, 10%, or whatever. We now have the benefit of the exchange rate. So then you don't see these peaks and troughs that you see in Bordeaux. It's a very different thing. There's been a justification. And certainly the last 2 years we're seeing a levelling off, and in 2014 prices have actually come down a little bit. We might not have come down from the growers, they've kept them the same, but with the exchange rate in the UK, we've all been able to sort of benefit the customers with bringing the prices down to a certain extent.
What do you feel about the superstar, the celebrity domain, celebrity grower? Do you think that's good for Burgundy or not?
I think that there's no such thing as bad PR, and I think it is brilliant. I mean, if you look at Vosne-Romanée, there are an extraordinary number of domains who are making sensational wines, and we all want to drink them. It's just a great shame that now demand exceeds supply to a frightening level. That we can't really, many of us can't afford to drink them. And the real concern is that, for me, is that certain domains are reaching price levels where the traditional buyer of those domains, and many of them were incredibly loyal, would buy every year for the last 10, 15 years. They suddenly can't buy them anymore. And yes, we can find replacement buyers, but what worries us is that whether those new buyers who can afford some of these stratospheric prices, are they just buying by fashion, and whether they have that same loyalty. If certain sort of journalists or whoever suddenly recommend a different domain, will they just walk away? So what we don't know is whether these new consumers will have the same level of loyalty to the growers that some of the traditional ones do. So it is a balance, and our feeling is that these top-end vineyards, the prices, barring one or two estates, are probably at their limit. They really are.
What is the fate of fine wine at this end?
I mean, I think Burgundy is, you have to look at it very differently to Bordeaux and sort of a Grand Cru vineyard. The fact is that I would say that 80% of our buyers who buy Grand Cru Burgundy en primeur, they're buying to absolutely drink. And it might even be 100%. They really do. People who buy these wines are passionate, and they are. But inevitably, there is going to be, prices will rise, because very little of it comes back onto the second market. And when it does, it's obviously going to be at an exorbitant price. So it's supply and demand, but most people are buying to consume, and then what does appear back on the market is such a tiny percentage of the original primeur release. It drives these prices to, frightening levels for many of us. Yeah.
Getting back to the real world, if people are beginning to experiment with Burgundy, what would you recommend from your list?
I think that we want people to have a sort of a range. I think it's always nice to find a really nice Bourgogne Rouge from a well-known domain, such as Domaine Goedhuis or Domaine Gislain Barto. So they're declassified Chambon Mussini or Vosne-Romanée, you've got that purity and vibrance of sort of red cherry fruits, and they're easy and accessible. I think that in the Côte de Beaune, appellations such as Savigny-les-Beaunes offer great price quality levels, and Domaine Simon Bise or Chandon de Briaille. They're gorgeous wines. And then I think that I'm a massive fan of Maurice Saint-Denis. I think that in Maurice you get a sort of a halfway house between some of the weight and generosity of Geoffroy-Chambertin, but some of the elegance of Chambord, and it's a really lovely one. But Geoffroy, people who want some things with sort of structure, estates like Drouin-la-Rose, where they make quite a large amount. They're a large domain, and they're priced very, very fairly. And even their Grand Crus, you can get their Grand Cru Clos de Vets at sort of the sort of £400-500 a 6-bottle case, which is not a silly price in comparison to many other Grand Crus. So I think there's that there, and for white wines, go to Côte de Beaune, Saint-Aubin, there's stunning things, and I think and Chablis is the business, particularly 2014. It's a superb vintage, and I think that if you look at the price for Premier Cru Chablis, it's exceptional value. It really is. Yeah.
It's marvellous, thank you. One last question on 2014 vintage. How would you describe the style, dividing up into red and white?
Yeah, I find it a tough one. I think that the reds, it's very difficult to do a comparison. I almost find that they have some of that purity and elegance of red fruits that the 2000 vintage have, but just with a little bit more substance. The acidity is a little bit racier and sort of fresher.
2014 whites?
Yeah, I love the 2014 whites. I think they're just fabulous in terms of they have this precision of fruit. They really represent the individual vineyards beautifully, they really do. They've got great freshness, and they certainly don't lack in sort of matière and weight and everything. And I think that one of the sort of those classic regions for the whites is the Chablis, because Chablis, you want this bite and freshness and drive and minerality, and this vintage is all about that. It's not a sort of big fat flamboyant vintage. You have the sort of the individual vineyard characteristics, but it's always this sort of life and freshness and nervosity at the finish. So I think it's a great vintage for whites, and people are going to love drinking them.